Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Grander Together. Thank you very much for coming to join us in this very exciting webinar. It is a series that's called Apparently. Tonight's webinar is entitled Offering Understanding and Support to Those with ADHD and Their Families. Now, what is this apparently? It is basically a series of panel discussions between people across generations, bringing their professional and personal perspectives to help strengthen intergenerational families. Tonight, we have partnered with very positive collaborators, for example, Shed and Aaron. So who are Shed, represented by Tina and Aaron? Well, Tina is a parent of a son with ADHD, ASD, and dyslexia. And she is a social worker by training. And interestingly, she had to relearn how to parent her son in a way that is suited for the kinds of challenges and difficulties he faces in life. And Tina has gone on to set up a social enterprise to help equip educators, parents, and organizations in the area of ADHD and mental health inclusion. Joining us tonight is also another interesting personality. He is Aaron Yeo. And Aaron is a foodpreneur as well as a founder of Wakao. And what's Wakao? It is a homegrown beef bowl brand from Singapore and known for its flame-torch Wagyu bowls and bold Japanese-inspired flavors. So Aaron has been very open about living with ADHD, and we'll talk more about his condition and what he's been through. But basically, Aaron sees it as part of what drives his creativity, intensity, and willingness to take risks, shaping both his entrepreneurial journey and the evolution of this business called Wakao and other food outlets which he might describe tonight. So Aaron has been, I would say, a very successful entrepreneur and one of Singapore's most recognizable modern beef bowl brands. So tonight we're going to have a conversational style webinar with our two guests, Tina and Aaron. Perhaps I can start with Tina. Tina, could you describe more about what you do and how did you come to do what you do now? Tina, over to you.
How I got to do what I'm doing is really because of my own son. So when he was 6, he was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. And I had studied social work, I studied psychology, and so I sort of thought that I know what it's about. Because dyslexia is more academic driven, right, related. So I got him a teacher to coach him in the reading aspect. ADHD, I really sort of dismissed it, to be super honest with you. I just sort of thought, okay, he's my number two. I'm sure I must have been a lot more lax with him, no matter what lah, number one and two, just getting crazy trying to manage them. So I just did my own thing. I didn't really go and read up more. I just thought I would be stricter, more consistent, and things just got worse. And so I realized, oh, wait a minute, okay. His reading picked up. So the dyslexia, fine, yes, he picked up thanks to the teacher and all that. But yeah, ADHD wise, I needed to be more than just more strict and more firm and yell louder. And yeah, so the traditional methods didn't work. And I really found myself having to go and read up more about it, actually go forward and, seek a proper parenting education that was specific to dealing with children with ADHD. So that was really my journey that led me into this whole area. Realizing then as I'm learning that as I turn around and parents around me are also struggling similarly to how I was, maybe just yesterday, I started helping others as well. So my mission is really so that more people can make less mistakes than I did and in supporting their children or, your grandchildren in this journey.
Thanks, Tina. And you said that you actually started discovering about dyslexia in your son and then
Mm,
subsequently managed to discover the ADHD. How
yes.
did ASD come into the picture then?
Mm. So he was only diagnosed with ASD a little bit later, at about 10 years old. It was at that point where he was struggling with mother tongue, and I also needed to refresh all his diagnosis in order to apply for exemption for mother tongue for him at that time. And because of how the teachers have been really cooperative with me and we've been, putting in good strategies at home, he actually didn't score ADHD anymore, so to speak. At the 10-year-old ADHD, because it was still the usual corners scale based on observation by parents and educator, the teachers didn't see anything wrong with him. Like he was doing well in school. So it was inconclusive. But at the same time, it wasn't that I was searching for diagnosis, but at the same time, psychologists said, a lot of the issues you keep bringing up have to do with his social communication deficits. So why don't we run ASD? And I was like, oh, really? And okay, so they went and did that. And true enough, he also has ASD. So it's actually quite rare that you have a child that actually gets diagnosed with all three things. It's common, but it's just rare that they actually get confirmation that they have it. Because ADHD and ASD, high functioning, are actually very overlapping. They share many traits, and there are some pediatricians and psychologists who actually tell me if they get one or the other, it already explains the rest of the traits. So you don't really need to go and get a secondary diagnosis. Yeah.
Tina, is there a difference between ADHD and ADD? Because ADHD is attention deficit
Mm.
hyperactivity
Yeah.
disorder. Is
Yeah.
that different from ADD?
Yes, there is a difference. So in the past, there was a separate diagnosis called ADD. No longer, since the DSM-5, it has been combined to one diagnosis. So it's called ADHD, either inattentive or ADHD combined type. That's how they call it. So the inattentive is the old ADD, where you sort of easily in your mind understand it by dropping the H. The such children and even adults tend to not have the hyperactive in a physical outward manner. They have it more internal. So their brains may be like drifted off somewhere, they daydream, but they're seated right in their chair. So they're not the ones to keep getting up, going to toilet, asking for this and that, and touching things and what they call bouncing off the walls. But their brains are actually not focused. So they've already drifted off and gone in 10,000 directions. So those are the inattentive ones. And the inattentive ones tend to get missed out on getting diagnosed and therefore get missed out with support as well because they're sitting there in their chair and they're not giving anybody problems. Yeah. And especially if their IQ is above average, they're scoring quite okay in school as well. So nobody is really noticing that they have any problems.
Okay.
Mm.
So you were saying that it is quite rare for dyslexia, ASD, and ADHD to come all together, but it's more common for ADHD and ASD to be together, the autistic spectrum disorder, ASD, yeah?
No, let me correct myself. The comorbidity of all three things, that means the co-occurrence, is very high. So it's actually rarer for someone to only have one thing. Okay.
Okay.
However, just between ADHD and ASD, is rare for children to get both of these diagnoses because they are both rather big diagnoses. Yeah, it's a bit long-winded the explanation for that. So if you all want to hear more, please reach out to me because I can take like the rest of the whole time just explaining that.
Okay.
The quick answer is that both are already enough for attention, for you to give attention to it. So you don't tend to get double, especially if you start with ADHD, like my case. Okay. So 6 years old, he got ADHD diagnosis. Should be 7, but I persuaded the psychologist to just go ahead at 6 years old. Um, and they would usually not diagnose a ASD because there's not that much additional value, okay, unless you need it. Like for at that time, I needed a mother tongue exemption, and I needed all the diagnosis, right? The other way is usually more common when you have ASD diagnosed since younger, that the child is then diagnosed with ADHD. Why? Because ADHD is the only developmental condition that has medication. There's no medication for ASD. There's no medication for dyslexia, neither any of the other the learning conditions like dyspraxia, dysgraphia, all that. They all do not have any medication. Only ADHD has a medication as an intervention. And therefore, some children might have to get that if they would like to explore medication as an option for treatment. Yeah.
So I guess the diagnosis for these conditions should come from a child psychologist, a trained psychologist, but the medication would have to be prescribed by a
Yes,
psychiatrist.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
noted. Thank you
Mm,
very much. So
mm.
just a note for the audience members who are in the room, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A function of this Zoom webinar, and we'll address them as soon as we can after we have finished chatting with Tina and Aaron. So, Aaron, maybe over to you. Could you share with us, who are you and how did you come to be what you are? What was your journey like since you were a child?
Thanks, Shanton, for the question, and hi everyone who's tuning in. Um, that's a really difficult question to answer in such a short time, but I think I will try to focus on the topic at hand, which is ADHD. Um, so just to introduce myself, I'm closing in on 40 soon. I hope I don't look like it, but I am. Um, so I was I diagnosed quite late in life with ADHD. Um, but anyways, as Shanton mentioned earlier, I am a business owner, entrepreneur, and um, mainly in the food and beverage business. And currently, I have 7 outlets running multiple concepts. Um, I like to think of myself as someone who is just trying my best to make it and trying to survive out there. But very happy to share some of the stories I have regarding how I've managed to build a somewhat successful business with on living with ADHD, and more pertinently as well, also how I navigated my schooling life and also my NS and Army life with ADHD. Um, I think one of the biggest motivators in my life is to share my story, and I always feel that if just 1 or 2 people out there receives a message of hope and possibilities, and if I could just touch 1 or 2 people, that's all that I really want.
Thanks for that, but you're too humble. I think I think you're where you are because, well, I read somewhere that people with ADHD make absolutely wonderful innovators and entrepreneurs and ideators,
Mhm.
where they tend to start a lot of things but have a bit of difficulty focusing, finishing the task. Is that
Mm.
what happened to you too?
Yes, actually, I think if I have the time, and please stop me if we run out of time or overshot my allocated time. But I think we start off when I was in school. Um, I was actually a terrible student. I didn't do well in exams. I didn't do well in big tests. And the thing is, uh, internally, there was never a yearning not to do well. I always wanted to do well. I always wanted to be a good student. I recognized the importance of education, and whatever my teachers and whatever my parents were saying to me at that time, I was like, yes, I completely am cognizant of everything that they're saying. And I had a yearning to do well. It's just that I could never um, score well. Right. And to your point earlier about starting tasks but not finishing tasks, I remember I did this many times. I would say, okay, this week is 4 weeks before the exam. So I'm going to start to buckle down and do well. So I would clean up my room. I would file all my worksheets and my test papers. I would line up all my textbooks and my assessment books and get all my pens. I used to love to go to Popular Bookstore and buy tons of pens and highlighters and say, okay, this is my war tools ready for the exam, right? And the first couple of days after that, I would, yeah, be sort of settling into some sort of routine. And I was like, okay, yeah, things are going well. And before you know it, by the third or fourth day, everything goes up in smoke again, and I'm all over the place again. Table's messy again. The worksheets are misfiled one more time. And this cycle repeated itself over and over again. And yeah, so that was one of the reasons why I never did well in school. Um,
How was the parent factor through this situation that you were in? How did your parents relate to you
mhm.
when all this was happening? Did they try to get you diagnosed at that time, or was there, I don't know, a reluctance? How did the parents, your parents, factor into this difficult situation you were in?
Okay, I think that's a great question. I would say very honestly that I think back in the early 2000s, neurodivergence was maybe not as widely or deeply studied as it is today. I think so. The on the surface, I think that was probably the last thing that would come to mind as to why you're not doing well in school. You might think that you're not disciplined enough. You might not have the right techniques. You might not this or that and the other. So there were many avenues that my parents explored in an attempt to find a reason why I wasn't doing well, right? But that being said, of course, they had their fair share of worries, anxiety, disappointment even. But I've always had a very loving family, and on top of that, a very loving extended family as well. I have two aunties who were always there for me. Like they would pick me up after school. In fact, I should have mentioned this, but I had this auntie who I would call and say that I want to Ponteng school. I want to get out halfway. Can you come and make some scene in the principal's office? And she would say, okay, I'm on the way. And she'll come and say, oh yeah, I got to bring him here, there, and then get him out of school. And I would call her many, many times. Um, yeah, but I always felt that I had that flaw of love, yeah, through this. But to answer your question, ADHD was never on the table. It was never mentioned to me. I came to uh, the diagnosis through my own journey of self-discovery.
How old were you then at that time?
I think, okay, so it first started off with going for counseling because uh, in the period between not doing well and getting diagnosed, of course, my behaviors also changed. I felt very misunderstood. And there was a period also that was very rebellious. I was like, since the teachers in school labeled me as a misfit or a rebel, then I might as well just be a rebel and I might as well be a misfit, right? So I was just like, forget about class, skip school, be disruptive in class. I always tell this story, but back in secondary school, I spent a year where I had this particular teacher, my math teacher, who it was a standing order that every time she walked into class, I would have to take my table and move it out to the corridor and sit down on the corridor because she didn't want me in class. So it was automatic. So they had to reassign my seat to the seat right in front of the door so that I could do the table moving in and out easily.
I wouldn't dare to ask what school you're in.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
won't say, but it's a good
Oh,
school, good school.
oh dear, oh dear. Yes.
But yeah, but like I said, until today I don't harbor any blame or
Yes.
any unhappiness about that because I was indeed truly very disruptive, and I think to protect the rest of the 30 something students in class, I think the teacher had to do that, and probably to their benefit as well. So
So when was it, Aaron, in that phase where you
yeah,
had to be subject to this,
right,
up to the point where you actually got a diagnosis and went, "Oh, this is my condition."
right.
How was
Right.
that
So
transition?
so so this whole disruptiveness and maybe the catalyst for everything started in secondary four, where I actually scored very badly for my prelims. I got like 38 points for my prelims. But somehow or rather, I had a tuition teacher who said, okay, I'm going to force you to study. I'm going to turn up at your doorstep, right, by hook or by crook, right? And so she came. Her name is Mrs. Leong. I'm truly grateful for her. She came every day for 1 month, and she would just because she was such a caring and pastoral person, she would like hold my hand and say, "Come, let's go upstairs and sit down." And so I ended up getting 11 points for my O levels, from 38 to 11 in a month, right? Yeah, so that's amazing. And then so I made it to JC, but then the I didn't have Mrs. Leong in JC, right? So the issue started again, and so throughout JC I was really very disruptive and very depressed. My attendance in JC was 43%, so I skipped school more than half time. So on the advice of a few people and all that, I ended up going for counseling, and then so counseling led to psychology, and then I was seeing a psychologist, and then psychologist led to psychiatrist. And that's when actually I was seeing a psychiatrist for depression. And in his office, I couldn't sit still. So I was standing up, going to his bookshelf, taking out books, flipping them, touching the things on his table, twisting. And then he said, come, 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 sit down, sit, 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 sit. And then he gave me a diagnosis test. And then he said, look, I'm pretty sure you have ADHD. Right. And then as we went through the symptoms, then he was like, okay, definitely everything clicks. And so that was such an enlightening moment. And also, I really felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders because it finally put into context um, the delta, the difference between my yearning to do something and my actually doing it, right? And there was this huge gap because I've always wanted to score well, I always wanted to be a good student, but then I just couldn't get it done. And so the ADHD diagnosis put everything into context, right? The behaviors, the failures, and it made me realize that hey, it's not really you, right? But there's something that you need to kind
It's
of
a
work.
condition, yeah, that
It's a
he couldn't
condition.
control. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Yes.
subsequently, and I hope I'm not hogging too much time, but subsequently, then through medication and also a lot of self-awareness, um, I found um, I found some win in my sales again.
Some stability
Yeah,
somewhat.
some stability. So when I
Yes.
went to uni, I ended up topping the level. Um, because I mean there are a few techniques that I would be willing to share with you guys later on if you have questions that I use to combat my ADHD in university.
Yes,
Uh,
indeed, we will talk about what are the ways that you have been
mhm,
coping and
mhm.
maybe even your medication journey. Can I switch now to Tina? I was wondering if you could share with our audience tonight when or what would the symptoms be before a concerned parent or relative would say, hey, let's do a proper psychology diagnosis, and when would you say, this one is probably just behavioral and environmental? How do parents and grandparents make that assessment?
Mm. Yeah, it's not easy, yeah, to actually ascertain straight away, like looking at every child, oh, this naughty one, is really naughty. Then this naughty one, has an excuse ADHD. Okay, the problem is ADHD symptoms look totally like naughtiness, right? So like Aaron's experience, and when in that time teachers just didn't know better, parents also didn't know better. They just look at him defiant, don't show up, not paying attention, disrupt class. It's just all this is naughtiness, right? But there is a difference in their ability to regulate themselves. Okay, so their ability to regulate themselves, even that sense of hyperactivity, it's always overboard, is more than their age group. So that's some simple kind of measurements. That's why, as parents, you always need community, and even with grandparents too, right? If you only just huddle as your own family with adults in the home and then children there, you can't compare. You can't see whether this child is responding in a way that's suitable for his age or not. So that's why ADHD is also diagnosed only from 7 years old and above, which is P1 onwards. And also at P1, you don't see them because they're in school, right? So having a very close, open communications with the teachers is also very important. And giving weight to what teachers say. If the teacher tells you that, hey, your child is like, not really able to focus, struggling to do this or that, parents don't be dismissive because we see them in a different context. And when they're at home and they have all your attention and there's only one child in the whole house, now we have low birth rate. Um, it's harder for you to see whether they are developmentally delayed in this area of self-regulation. And self-regulation encompasses a lot of areas, right? Organizing yourself, managing your emotions, organizing your memories, which has to do with working memory, like recall, and that's why it affects their academic work as well. Yeah, so it's a lot to do with whether they are at performing to their age level capacity and also to their IQ level capacity. If you know this child, like, wow, very fast, they learn their spelling list, they learn their things there, they seem to know. But then go to school, the things that come home, the spelling list come home, is like 5 or 6 upon 10 or even like zero because they like clean wipe out, their brain like cannot recall. These are telltale signs that, hey, the child might understand something, comprehend something, be very sharp, but his performance, that means he can't show you what he knows in the context of the school type of spelling test. when it's all very clinical and all of that. Come home in the car, you ask him, spell the whole list, he probably just rattle it off to you and can spell already because he's relaxed, he's calm, and he's able to access all the memories that are stored. Yeah, so a little bit of these things. I know they're a little bit they're not technical, they're not scientific that you can, okay, if the child does this, you know that they're definitely, have a neurodevelopmental condition. So do check in with the medical people, right? So beyond psychologists, pediatricians are able to diagnose as well, and also psychiatrists. So you do have a wider range of people that you are able to tap into. Yeah, besides just looking for a private psychologist, so to speak. Yeah.
What I hear from you is it's not easy to draw the line that this is and this is not, but for the love of our children, we should at least take a step to get some help because
Mm.
that early help would be beneficial for the child.
Yeah,
Yes.
correct. For
Maybe
sure.
over to Aaron now. So then, after the schooling years, and then you did well in university, there is actually a question about national service. And I want to tie this with a question where I read somewhere that some people with ADHD get bullied a little bit more than the normal child. So, how was your schooling and national service like when it comes to interacting with the people around you, and how did they treat you and did they bully you?
No, no, actually, I think NS was a very fulfilling time for me. I think I don't know if I can answer your question well because by NS I already had some level of diagnosis, some level of self-awareness of what I was, or what neurodivergence I had. Um, so I made it a point in NS to really find a purpose, find something as ADHDers would say, hyper focus on. So I ended up doing very well in NS because of that, because I knew what to look out for. And yeah, in fact, I even won some awards in NS, like best soldier and all that kind of thing, because I did really enjoy myself. And part of the reason was because I felt that by then I had already some semblance of self-acceptance, some semblance of family acceptance as well, or at least things were precipitating and beginning to kind of help everyone understand. And so in that way, I had put myself in quite a secure position to go through such a, to some people, quite a monumental life change, going from school to NS, right? And then also for ADHDers, the regimentation in NS is quite a killer, right? Because you're quite free-spirited, and regimentation and routine, something that even till today I struggle with tremendously. So, funnily enough, though, the threat of getting punished, signing extras, or going to DV, right, actually helped me focus, right? To say, okay, you've got to get up at this time, you've got to be there at this time, right? And there's no negotiation, right? If not, you really be in deep trouble. So actually that helped me harness some of my strengths, like, okay, to say, okay, I get through all the inertia of doing things, the just putting tasks off, you know, postponing things, right? To say, okay, no, this is needed of me, I've got to get it done. So actually NS helped me a lot.
Maybe I could go on to Tina now. So I hear from Aaron that perhaps a schedule, a regimented, a discipline, series of actions for the person with ADHD is useful. Tina, could you share with us what else would ADHDers benefit from in terms of treatment, the environment? What can we do for them?
Oh, that's a very huge question, but our regimen alone is not necessarily totally helpful because it really depends how the regimen was developed. If you do it in consultation with the child and in working very clearly based on their needs, then definitely routines help. Having very clear expectations. Like after school, this happens, right? You have your meal, and then after that, you have a break, and then after that, you have to do homework, right, at a certain time, or when this happens. So actually having very fixed schedules is important. Not fixed, sorry, but fixed routines means expectations of what's going to happen next. It's important for them because the problem is when they have too much unstructured time, and unstructured meaning that you just like say, okay, go and do what you like. Okay, the do what you like, but you give them a creative corner to go and create. That's structure. Okay, but unstructured is totally like, oh, you just go and rest, go and do whatever. And this child is like a bit doesn't know how to occupy himself, which a lot of our children nowadays don't know how to occupy themselves. They can get into a lot of trouble. Okay, because they go and experiment, they go and take risks, they go and do funny things. The worst thing for a child, a home with ADHD child, is silence. When you suddenly everything is very silent, you better go and rush and find where your child is, fiddling with, because he's probably found something really interesting and curious, but it might be something dangerous. It might be something, but he's just quietly occupied. Okay, so occupy them with good structure. Set up good expectations, even clear do's and don'ts. Of course, focusing more on the do's, right? Like I said, if you don't want them to be on screens that much, you have to give them alternatives. You have to give them replacements. And sometimes it also means you have to accompany them to do something first. Because especially if your child doesn't have siblings yet or they're of a certain age, they do need company. They're not going to sit down and paint something for like 2 hours unless that's something they're very, very interested in. Initially, they paint, they splatter all over, and the next moment they will be making a mess already, right? So in order to expose them to other nice, healthy activities, you oftentimes have to come alongside them. Yeah, so having clear communications and really listening, actually. Children don't ordinarily lie. Okay, they often lie just to get out of scolding. So if we are very quick to scold them about this and that and all that, you will find you perpetuate children who are dishonest. But you start listening to them when they tell you, I'm tired, I cannot do this, I got no energy. They are just saying that they are tired, they got no energy. But we don't shouldn't jump on them, right? Oh, you're tired. You're just being lazy, lah. You got so much homework. I give you the iPad only. You're surely not tired anymore, right? Then we go and philosophize and moralize the whole thing, and then it becomes a huge explosion. So the next time the child is tired, what will they tell you? They won't dare to tell you they're tired already. They will say, I'm sick, or they will create something that, maybe is more dramatic or something, or they may even go and hide their homework and say, I got no homework, I got nothing, right? And then they don't want to tell you the truth. So we have to be very careful as parents, as grandparents, to be realize that actually how we approach them creates a pattern. Yeah. So interestingly, if you've been doing things, so back a little bit to the diagnosis part, the telltale signs. If you've been doing parenting a certain way and it's not working with this particular child, then there is something not the same with this child's brain. Okay, the way the child responds is just not the same. Yes, of course, there's sometimes, we have to scold the child or we shout a little bit louder. But for children with ADHD, right, you scold them, you shout them at them, they are not going to remember. The next time you will be finding yourself shouting louder, scolding even louder, maybe even losing your cool. And again, they still don't remember. So remember that if your techniques are not working, then there could be something different with the brain of your child, meaning that they just respond differently because they cannot recall until you start yelling already. And then even then, they're so stressed, they still will not be able to follow your instructions. Yeah, so
I
there's a lot
really
of all these changes that are minor but actually pretty major in order to bring out the best in children with ADHD.
Yes, I want to give a special shout out to all the parents and grandparents out there who have to care for people with ADHD. When I say people, it's not just children, I think adults
Mm,
too. I mean, they say that these are special people. I think parents are special parents as well because they got to do so much more
mm.
extra learning and extra activities. My next question is to both Aaron and Tina. I read somewhere that perhaps sometimes having too much sugar makes them more active, or sometimes we're told, oh, you just tire the child out and make them run around until they have no more energy and then they'll cool down. Are all these myths or do they actually work? Either Aaron or Tina, you can give your take.
Erin, you have any personal take on that?
Um, well, I have no scientific expertise on this particular area, but uh, I think I can't speak for the sugar part for sure, but I think as to the getting tired and tiring your child out, I tend to disagree with that because even till today, I can have an absolutely crazy day at work, physically, mentally exhausting day at work. But sometimes I just find my mind still super active at night. And in fact, I kid you not, just maybe about 3 weeks ago, I was in bed at about 2, 3 a.m., had a long day, and suddenly I decided I have to go and pack this room of mine. And I got up and I went to pack till 5 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. Decided I had to pack the whole room. Right. So that's very typical of ADHD, right? You just do
Correct.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So,
I don't think, yeah, sorry, Tina.
correct. You're right. No, no, I just wanted to chip in and say you're right. That sugar is not the cause of ADHD. Obviously, sugar for any kind of child can make them go a bit more berserk because they just have that spike in energy, right? So if you do sense your child has more hyperactivity, then yes, in general, don't give them something like super sweet, especially if you want them to have a calm afternoon. Yeah. So in general, sugar just doesn't work with anybody. Actually, even the adults lah, we're all told to cut sugar from our diet. So I think that's sort of a no-brainer for any child, but of course more so for children who can respond more to their physiological changes much faster. On the other hand, activity is not to tire the child, but to constructively use their energy such that they actually are able to focus better. So exercise has been known to actually be good, almost as good as medication for a child. Of course, depending on what time you're able to do it, and most of us cannot do exercise for children early morning before they reach school. Okay, so in a sense, it doesn't replace medication, but exercise in good measure and consistent aerobic, where they actually get your heart rate up and all that, right? It helps with blood circulation, and with the blood circulation, there's more circulation that goes to the prefrontal cortex, and it helps them to focus. Yeah, so having sports, having outdoor activities is actually very helpful and useful for ADHD children. But like what Aaron said, it's not about tiring them out. Because sometimes when they're tired out, they can get even more dysregulated, and then they can't do the usual things, which is like following up with their homework or whatever. And the crazy thing is the two, even no matter how tired they are, you still have to have good sleep routines because they often struggle with sleep all the way to adulthood. So they have to adopt a lot very systematic ways of falling asleep because it's very hard for them. Yeah, it's
Otherwise,
one
they
of
will go
the
and pack the room
accompanying
at two
things.
o'clock.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
actually,
that's right.
I can attest to that, that even
Mm,
till today, the largest problem that I contend with
mm,
as a result of ADHD is my
mm,
sleep.
mm,
Because I have tremendous trouble falling asleep.
mm.
Sometimes I can toss and turn for a long
Yep.
time, or even get a second wind of energy and decide I am going to do something,
Yes, you
and
might
then
as well since you're awake.
yeah.
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah.
and also as to Tina's point, I think she mentioned a lot of really, really good points. I think emotional regulation is another thing. Having this constructive environment to direct your energies towards. Just now, I think earlier on, Tina mentioned that just don't throw your child or someone in a completely unregulated, unmonitored space and just allow them to, because doesn't give them a structure for their mind to kind of
Mm,
do something constructive. And
mm,
yeah, I have been a victim of that as well. I have done a lot of crazy stuff in my life because your mind is just trying to do all
mm.
sorts of things. So I think Tina's points are very, very salient here.
Thank you. Perhaps we can go to an audience question right now. So there's one question for Tina, and the question goes: I am supporting a parent whose male teen is ADHD. So this is like a helper, caregiver, or a relative. The mother wants this male teen to be independent, to self
Mm.
regulate in terms of managing screen time. So if the mother were to hide the laptop, the teen would not think about it. But when the laptop is visible, the teen will use it to play games. So the person uh, has asked the mother to remove the trigger, right, which is a laptop. Is this correct? Maybe to take away a trigger.
Yes, yeah, you're on the right track. If the teen doesn't make a fuss of when he doesn't see the laptop, then it's out of sight, out of mind in a way. So this is part of routines as well. It's true. If you don't want them to access the screens and the laptops, just don't have it visible. Don't have it something accessible to them immediately after school or in the afternoon times. But because it's a teen, I would suggest that you do it in collaboration with the teen. That means talk to the teen about it Because there would be times, right, that you really cannot hide the laptop for whatever reason it might be. The mom is unwell, or whatever thing, and then it can't be that you have no other strategies except to just keep the trigger out of view. That cannot be your only strategy. Yeah. So key thing for a teen, and the key is she wants him to be independent. So you do need to help him to learn the independent skills of managing his own screen time as well. And that comes with negotiating and helping to understand what the screen is used for, at what time, what is it used for, what's the priorities, and then how do you regulate yourself, and be having very open communications about it, because you don't want him to end up craving or being very frustrated. And also this, like I said, at the moment it works, but on one day the mom a bit too late, he catches eye of it, and then she removes it. It could cause a huge altercation, and he's a teenager already. So you cannot do it like a child where you just like remove a toy and expect that he will forget. He's big enough. So have a discussion, set down the rules, set down this kind of arrangement, and let it be an open secret that the laptop is kept out of view from this time to that time, because you can be involved in all sorts of other things, right? So that is not a secret in a sense. Yeah.
So
And
it's
then
about
the teen is aware that his triggers are being managed, and then he also learns to manage his triggers. You would find that the best way when you see that they are being independent is they start to employ strategies that you are also employing on them. So he may go, okay, can you please don't let me see the laptop because I got a lot of work today. I need to do my, pen and paper work first, and then I need my laptop at 6 o'clock or something like that, right? So when
so it's
he
about
can negotiate that
communication.
thing openly,
Communication, negotiation, and
correct, he
just
takes on the
logic.
strategy as his
Logic.
own. And that is what you want, the independence. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So there's another a parent who has a
Mm.
9-year-old child. He
Yep.
was not diagnosed with ADHD or ASD according to the doctor,
Mm.
but this child still exhibits the traits of what we described earlier about
Mm.
ADHD sufferers.
Yep.
So he has emotional outbursts, and once a day he will hit his parents.
Yeah.
And the parents could not stop him, and it ended with an altercation, as you say, for an hour, and he finally calms down.
Mm.
What can such parents do
Mm.
before they go crazy?
Yeah, thank you for asking and seeking help in this way. Yeah, it can feel quite embarrassing to ask such a thing. So I'm very glad that you are willing to say that. Many of us as parents, I know we don't want to blow up at our children. Okay, so a lot of you are actually quite regulated. However, we also cannot allow the child to blow up on you. He is 9 years old now, and if he can hit you for 1 hour, if you don't do anything, the next moment when he grows a little bit more, which is very fast, they'll be twins, like, in a split second. They grow that fast. And he's much bigger, and if he starts hitting you for 1 hour, yeah. So it is not safe when you are not safe. Okay. So definitely it is a cry for I mean, this is a situation that is something that you have to pay attention to. All right. Think about what it is that led up to his emotional outburst, and then do a more preemptive preparation, sorry, to those issues that are triggering him. So is it because he didn't get something that he expected in a certain way, like the meal, was different from what he expected? Is it a routine, a rigidity problem? Some children have very high cognitive inflexibility, so they are very rigid. This is a characteristic of ASD children, paramount, but secondarily, ADHD children can sometimes have quite high rigidity as well. Okay. So with the rigidity, they get outbursts very quickly because something is just not according to what they expect. It could be very simple things, but it can trigger them hugely, right? Like you put something in a different way, different direction, you place the food in a different way. It sometimes like the chicken touch the rice, the vegetable touch the rice, or cannot eat already. Everything must be separated, cannot touch each other, cannot have sauce, or, if these are some things that are happening, for example, these are not ordinary. Okay, so it has a lot to do with sensory issues too. Palate, the taste, how he perceives the textures of food when they are mixed up, how he perceives how it looks like and what he wants it to feel in his mouth. These are all sensory issues. So these are a good clue for you to know that the child is not able to regulate himself when he's confronted with certain types of triggers. And you do need to find out what the triggers are so that you can avoid and reduce the triggers. And then he's 9 years old. He's not 5 years old. So you can teach him some emotional regulation techniques as well, right? Talk to him when he's calm about what he can do, what he cannot do. He cannot hit you, for example. He can go and hit a pillow, right? He can even give him something that he can hit, some stress balls, a cushion, or even somewhere outside. He can yell and scream and punch and kick or something, but he cannot kick or he cannot destroy items. He cannot kick and hurt you all as parents. Okay, this is something that you do have to draw the line and help him to address, right? You have to also try to watch for escalations, meaning after he's triggered, does he escalate straight away? Usually there is a little bit of a window. You do need to figure out what you might be doing that could also add to his trigger, right? And then adjust and learn good strategies. Yeah, it's not just about giving in to the child and like pandering to them and like, no, 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 it's all okay. It's not. When it's something so elaborate like that, a child, just even a naughty child will get tired before 1 hour. Okay, this is definitely huge dysregulation that there are other underlying issues involved. Yeah, so do go and seek help.
What if the child has forgotten that, hey, mommy and daddy have told me that I cannot do this, and then it happens again, but because the child didn't
Yep,
remember, is it like a
correct.
repetition training, or what do we do?
Mm, okay, that's why there has to be some replacement actions, right? When the child is angry already, we have to very quickly guide them to do something else, or to give them a association, or when I'm angry, this is something I can, quickly do. There is something that you can try, which is what I call the change of state strategy, where you do something totally different. For example, you give him a ice to hold, something a frozen a bottle of water. So when he holds it, it is cold. So that's called change of state, where you actually distract him by a sensory change that is dramatically different from whatever is happening now. Okay. And that can interrupt his meltdown and help him to cool down. Yeah. And also helps you to then hopefully distract him away from, say, something dangerous or, even hitting yourselves or something like that. Yeah.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think we have addressed several of the other questions that our audience have asked regarding a learning journey, or when Aaron was younger, how did he cope with studies? We've done the studies part. I want to switch gears now to maybe adulthood,
Mm.
and I think we have also heard that no one outgrows ADHD. It's just a coping mechanism. Perhaps could I just ask Aaron, because there's a question around, should ADHDs disclose their condition to their employer, and how does that work, or should they not, or how do they cope with working life? Aaron.
Okay, I have not been an employee, so I can't I can't advise on that. But I think that generally speaking, you should consult with perhaps your insurance agents first, as well as some other potentially longer lasting or actions that have a longer lasting effect before you want to decide to disclose or not. Um, but in general, I think there are many, many, many high functioning people with ADHD that I don't think it has a bearing on working life whatsoever if you know how to manage it well enough. So for me, I think the techniques that I use in working life today are very similar to those techniques that I used in schooling life. So the first thing, which I didn't get to share, which I think is very important for all parents out there, is I use this thing called the Pomodoro technique, which basically there are many variations of it, but basically, and you might think that I'm saying this wrongly, but I used to study for 15 minutes and then take a break for 45 minutes. So it's completely opposite, right? And then that gave me a very good reward schedule, right? So I knew that. So what I would do is I like follow a TV series, right? So I say, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna do 15 minutes of something or 20 minutes of something, and then I'm going to watch one episode, 40 minutes long, right? But before I knew it, I would have done like 10 or 12 hours, 10 or 12 episodes. But then in that time frame, I would have managed to put in about 2 hours or so of work, or a little bit more, right? So that allowed me to actually get some requisite work already in, or some studies already in, right? And then as you get used to it, and as you progress onward, then you can kind of alter that to maybe half an hour on, half an hour off, or even 45 minutes on, 15 minutes off later on. So that made actually sitting down, putting myself in a structured environment to get a task complete, it made it much less painful. It made it easier to even start because problems with a lot of issues with ADHD is that they have trouble starting something. Sometimes it's just too much inertia to do something, right? So to give yourself a reward that's large enough for you to overcome the inertia, to actually sit down and do something, that was very, very helpful for me throughout schooling life. And I do that as well these days with work. Like, for example, for meetings, I tend not to keep meetings anything longer than half an hour or 40 minutes long. In fact, I always ask my guys to summarize and re-summarize and re-summarize to the point where I only have one or two key points to address. Everything else, I think, is noise. Because for me, if I were to have go through so much detail, I would probably not be able to give my best self as well. So sometimes it's really about the quality, getting a few wins under your belt, right? Getting, like if you are going through school or you're going through work and you feel that there are too many subjects for you to handle, maybe you can just say for this term or this semester, you know what, I'm going to fail 3 out of 4 of my subjects. I don't care. But I just want to prove to myself I can do one first, right? If it's not a critical term, it's not a critical semester, just give yourself that confidence. And then later, as you progress, you might do two, three, and then eventually find yourself being able to succeed in all of them.
Thanks for
Uh,
that, Aaron. It sounds
yeah,
like, I mean, it's fun to be the boss, right? The boss
yeah,
can say, keep your meetings to 30 minutes and all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Do you have advice for working adults out there who
Mhm.
may be working with people with ADHD and maybe they may not be aware, like, how do we identify and what kind of support can we give to our colleagues whom we suspect are coping with ADHD?
All right. So I think, at least I speak for myself. I think that sometimes when you work with ADHD, too much open-endedness or vagueness in a task gives you that paralysis, right? So if you say, "Oh, go and handle this for me," right? The person, the ADHD might not even know where to start. Like, oh, so what am I going to do now, right? So sometimes being able to break things down into very small bite-sized pieces and help string this person along, right? You might actually see that they do it very well. It's sort of like saying, um, you could eat a whole piece of chicken, right? You could eat a whole chicken, but you have to cut it up into small pieces. Then you find yourself, okay, I can complete it. But if you try to bite the whole chicken like that, you're probably not going to, finish it, right? So it's the same thing for work, it's the same thing for tasks. You got to break it down. You got to let your mind know that, look, I'm just going to have to bite this very, very small piece off first. And then once you get that momentum going, it kind of builds on from there. And also just the understanding that don't overload this person, right? Or this person might, uh, not take to 2 hour long meetings, overly verbose, talk too much, have emails that are too long. And then these days with AI, it's so easy to kind of summarize and simplify things, right? And then kind of just do it point by point, message by message. I think that really helps a lot. Um,
So
yeah.
how best can we draw out their fullest potential for our colleagues who are ADHS?
Um, well, I think that frankly speaking, having an understanding and some compassion for whoever you're working with or whoever you're working for, right? I think it's very important, right? It doesn't take long these days to read up about the symptoms of ADHD, some of the coping mechanisms that might or might not work for you, but just the awareness and the knowledge, I think, is a crucial first step. I I check myself in trying to prescribe a singular type of solution or anything on this webinar because I think everyone's a little bit different and there are many, many tools that you can use. But I think the most important two things that you need to have are the compassion and the awareness. I think from there, um, everything will fall into place.
And I suppose discussion, negotiation,
Mm.
communication still holds true whether they are children or adults. It's a
Yep,
mutual respect that
yep,
we need to accord each other. Yeah, thank you
yep.
very much, Aaron.
Sorry, I just one
Perhaps,
point to add.
yes.
Sorry, yeah. I just forgot also for students and working people. For me, I found tactility was very important, right? So like touching, like even now, like I'm touching like something, small on the table, right? To keep my attention. So in university, I did well because it was the first time I was able to bring a laptop into class. And so that allowed me to type. And so the typing allowed me to focus because it's dual function, right? So I'm listening and typing at the same time. Versus in school where your teachers would literally say, "Stop moving your hands. Look at me, right? Stop fidgeting, right?" So it's very different. So because the more they tell you to stop fidgeting, the more you're like you've lost yourself. So by being able to type, to touch, to move, it allowed me to do much better in school and at work as well.
So there's a very interesting related question. If we could just take 30 seconds to answer that. So someone says, is having to touch others and things around them also some trait of having ADHD? So you've talked about touching something tactile. How
Yeah.
about people, touching
Oh
people?
no, I don't think that's something I've never heard of. Yeah, never heard
Yeah,
of.
no, no, usually not because they usually quite careful about relating to other people. Of course, sometimes if they have some social communication deficit, which is an overlap with ASD, they may not respect personal space so much. So when they talk to you, they come up very near you, for example, or they hang around very near you just because they don't know that there are these kind of personal space boundaries. But they don't tend to be very touchy because they tend to be sensorial, so they don't even really like people touching them either. Yeah. So they don't tend to, yeah. It's not going to make them like, yeah, um do
Okay,
things that are, yeah,
thanks. And
in that
with
way.
that, I think we have addressed many questions, and I've tried my best to summarize some of the questions in the area of children studies, diagnosis, and even support for our own family members and siblings, even in the adult world. We do well, yeah, we are running short of time, and perhaps I know there are still many questions and queries that our audience members have. Perhaps I could leave it to Tina to describe what are these two support programs that you can
Hmm.
offer to our audience members.
Sure. Thanks, Shanton. Do follow my socials. You can scan the QR code that's here on my virtual background. And one of the ones that's upcoming is a full day session that I do for parents. But if you're a grandparent, you're a carer, you can also come for this. It's usually conducted over 4 sessions, but we have decided to do something new this year and cramp it all into a Saturday, like a one whole day retreat thing. Come and learn what is about ADHD, what ADHD and what all the symptoms are. We also cover high functioning ASD in mainstream school setting as well. Yeah, so this is something I would really recommend for you. Also, there are monthly support group that I help to host under the charity called Spark, which is a charity supporting families with ADHD. And we discuss this book every month. So we will give a summary on the chapter. We also sometimes will invite speakers who have ADHD who will also share how they have learned different skills and all that along the way. And this is just a 1.5 hour meeting every second Wednesday of the month. So try and put a recurring meeting. Look out for this. Also post this on my socials. You just need to register in order to get the link, but it's free. Yeah, so do come and find out more. It's hard for me. We have a very limited time this evening. I see many, many questions that I wish I can get to and answer you more directly. But it takes more than a 1 minute answer. Okay, things like how do you manage cognitive inflexibility? Should we label ADHD too quickly? You can't identify and label them, but if the doctor has already given them a diagnosis, then don't be afraid of the label because otherwise, similar to Aaron, when he didn't know he was ADHD, he's being labeled other things by everyone else and probably himself, right? I'm down, I'm dumb, I'm not trying hard enough, I must really be lazy, I'm the naughty one in school. So children and even adults will continue to label themselves and they actually have a lot of depressive thoughts because of that, because they have a lot of self-blame, they're wondering what's wrong with them. So diagnosis itself can be very liberating. Yeah, so don't be afraid of it too much as a label, as more as a clarity for you to then seek the specific resources.
Yes. Thank you, Tina, for letting us know what are all the other support areas that you could offer from Shed as an organization. And thank you very much, Aaron, for sharing really from your lived experience of what you've gone through. I would encourage all our audience members to seriously consider linking up with Tina for more support and more resources. And do visit Aaron at his Wakao food outlets. I think he will really appreciate. I think it is a shout out that he has become successful today after having had to cope with so much difficulty in life, but he has been successful and we really want to salute him for that. So in closing, perhaps I could suggest to all our audience members, if you are willing to, I will discuss with Tina and Aaron if some of the questions that have been asked didn't seem to yet have a satisfactory answer. Let me connect with Tina and Aaron to see if we can do perhaps a written answer and put it in the form of a newsletter and circulate it to all of you who have provided us with your email addresses. Feel free to delete it if it doesn't sit well with you. But nonetheless, we really wish we could answer all the questions. So it leaves me to conclude this webinar by saying that as you leave the Zoom meeting, there will be a little feedback form. I hope you can give us your feedback so that Grander Together can perform even better and bring you more relevant, apparently, webinars that will be useful and beneficial for you and our community. Do feel free also, please, to scan this QR code to connect with Grander Together. We are on social media, so when you click this QR code, you can choose whether you could connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, by WhatsApp, by Telegram, or even come directly to our website on www.grandertogether.sg. So I do hope you can all click on this QR code and then connect with us. So until we deliver another apparently webinar, I would like to wish Tina, Aaron, and all our wonderful participants tonight a very good night and have a great week ahead. Thank you very much for being with us.